There are some conflicting reports here that AJ Ferrari and Penn State are in contact with one another. Now, why would Cale Sanderson entertain an idea like this?
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State Wrestling, and thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, the #1 Penn State sports podcast out there. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. If you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast. As always, be a part of the conversation. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Jam-packed show. Does Penn State need a heavyweight? We're going to talk about it. Zack Ryder enters the transfer portal after Rocco Welsh joins the team. We got to start with AJ Ferrari being linked to Penn State. It seems crazy because it is crazy. AJ Ferrari was linked to Penn State. The word was, the initial report comes from Pat Minio in the wrestling room, that AJ Ferrari was in contact with Penn State and also Oklahoma State. So Penn State wasn't the only, and that's shocking, right? Penn State and Cale Sanderson, and then David Taylor just took over for Oklahoma State, plus the fact that all of the stuff that has been surrounding AJ Ferrari, all the off-the-mat issues, happened at Oklahoma State. I'll digress from that. We're going to focus on Penn State's point of view here. Why would Penn State entertain the idea of AJ Ferrari? Josh Barr was just an NCAA runner-up at 197. I have my suspicions that he might cut to 184, especially given the fact that Zack Ryder has just entered the transfer portal. Rocco Welsh comes in. There's a lot of log jams there at the upper weights, but 197 has an answer, whether it's Josh Barr or Cole Mirasola. And then heavyweight, does Penn State need a heavyweight? Because question marks surround Cole Mirasola, Connor's twin brother. And that was the rumor that started swirling, was that, well, AJ Ferrari's going to come in. Penn State can have AJ Ferrari just bulk up. He'll carry the weight easily, and he'll be extremely athletic and contribute to a team. But Penn State's not going to sacrifice the culture to bring on AJ Ferrari. I have a follow-up report to all of this as well. According to my sources, Penn State and AJ Ferrari are not in contact with one another. Penn State has no plans to bring on AJ Ferrari as a heavyweight or in at 197 to compete. There is no interest from Penn State in terms of bringing in AJ Ferrari. Is Pat Minio's report wrong? Well, let's define how communication or in contact, what does that mean? Was there a phone call at some point between the two sides? Who made that phone call? It wasn't Penn State. I can confirm that. So if AJ Ferrari had reached out to Penn State to gauge some interest, to see if hey, I'm willing to be a heavyweight, or I'm willing to compete at 197. Can I be a part of the mat room? And if Cale Sanderson or Penn State's side of it simply said no, which they did, then yes, technically the two sides, the two parties were in contact with one another. I guess that's technically true, but at this present moment, there aren't ongoing discussions, if you will. There's nothing along the lines there. There is no interest. There is no plan. There is no intention for AJ Ferrari to end up at Penn State. It's not going to happen because Penn State and Cale Sanderson have built a culture. I understand that AJ Ferrari is trying to rebuild himself, that he is trying to, again, I'm not going to speak on behalf of AJ Ferrari other than the fact that he's trying to be a changed man, if you will. I think we can all agree on that he's trying to. Whether that is presentation or he's actually doing it at the end of the day, Penn State doesn't want to take a risk on that. It's not worth the risk, especially when at 197 you have Josh Barr or Cole Mirasola. You have Cole Mirasola at heavyweight. That would just displace everything that this Penn State mat room stands for. That extends not only to the team itself, but the RTC program, everybody that's training there on a daily basis. I hope that AJ Ferrari continues to better himself and everything in that situation. But from Penn State's point of view, the risk is not worth the reward. And I could argue the same thing for Oklahoma State. David Taylor, protege of Cale Sanderson, is going to build something very similar to what Penn State is doing. They are going to have the same values. They are going to have the same foundation and do everything because that was the appeal of David Taylor as a coach, that he's learned so much from Cale Sanderson. So that's going to carry over to whatever program he chooses. I don't think AJ Ferrari is going to end up at Oklahoma State either. Was there a conversation? Was there a phone call? Was there a point of contact? Probably there was a point of contact, but that point of contact was mostly, would you want AJ Ferrari on an agent, someone from AJ Ferrari's party? Would you want AJ Ferrari in your mat room? Would you want him a part of your program? And the simple answer was no. But that is technically contact. That is technically a conversation. I don't know why David Taylor would make a move like that either. Sure, there's a little more uncertainty as far as what does 197 look like? What does heavyweight look like? And maybe some Oklahoma State fans can educate me as far as what the upper weights of the lineup would look like. You know, we're going to talk about Zack Ryder in just a moment here to see ultimately if he would end up with David Taylor and Oklahoma State. But AJ Ferrari, I mean, that's where everything started. His first exit was at Oklahoma State. Didn't fit in at Iowa, and Iowa, I don't even think wants him back. So, but this conversation being mostly about Penn State, as it should be. Again, this is a Penn State podcast, but they are not interested in Ferrari. They never were, because they do have, and it's two things. The lineup is full at 197 in heavyweight. There's no room for AJ Ferrari. And then in terms of the baggage that he would be bringing along, even though he is trying to better himself, is not worth it to Penn State and Cale Sanderson. And it would go against everything that Cale Sanderson has stated. It would make him look less authentic, less true to his word. And the same with the program. And there's no, like I said, there was no interest. There was no entertainment of it, which is why everyone was probably surprised, including myself, when that first was released, that Penn State's having discussions about this? What for? Well, there are not discussions about anything. AJ Ferrari will not be at Penn State. I just wish him well. I wish him well wherever he goes. Like I said, I'm not going to demonize somebody for trying to fix their situation, but it's not going to be at Penn State. It's going to be somewhere else, and maybe whoever it is, Josh Barr, Cole Mirasola. I know what everybody's thinking, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. We're going to talk about it more. The plan's at 184, 197, because Zack Ryder, he's part of this conversation, even though he is departing. So if you missed it the other day, Zack Ryder has entered the transfer portal, and he's certainly going to draw a lot of interest, probably from the guy that he trained with for the final year of his high school career. He did not finish his senior season in New York at his high school. He actually moved to Pennsylvania and worked at the M2 Training Center with David Taylor. So Oklahoma State, is that the logical destination? We'll talk about that and what 184 and 197 look like, which prompts this move, coming up after the break. And today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings snuck up on us again. And if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through all of it. Whether you're staying up late to watch NCAA tournament action, you're squeezing in a round of golf after work, or you're just trying to keep up with a busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. Through all the basketball madness, you'll be staying up late to watch this tournament action, and 5 Hour Energy will help you keep up with the next day. Extra daylight means extra activities. With longer days, you'll love getting outside to maybe you go for a run or go for a hike. And if you need a quick boost, choose Tropical Burst from 5 Hour Energy. You get the on-the-go convenience. Whether you're traveling for an event, traveling for a game, 5 Hour Energy is easy to grab and will keep you feeling refreshed. Head over to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, peach mango, or Tropical Burst. You can even build your own 12 or 24 pack and have it delivered right to your door. Do you need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized with 5 Hour Energy. I did briefly answer it in the previous segment about, well, Penn State needs a heavyweight. Still, there are question marks around Cole Mirasola, which we are going to address in the final segment. Let's pick back up with Zack Ryder. The bombshell yesterday was that he entered the transfer portal. This is no surprise. This doesn't shock me in the slightest that Zack Ryder is entering the transfer portal. The room got very crowded very fast, and it seemed like this was Zack Ryder's spot to lose, and he is going to lose it because he's not even going to have the chance to compete since he's entering the transfer portal. Again, I am not here to criticize Zack Ryder whatsoever. You have to make decisions that are in the best interest for yourself. And when you just use your red shirt, eligibility is a little more finite these days since there's no more additional COVID years or anything like that. But you need to go to a place where you do have a clearer path. And when Rocco Welsh came in, that somewhat disappeared. What also disappeared was more than just that. You could have dropped down to 174. Well, Levi Haynes is going to be there for one more season, but maybe you do that because I bring up Josh Barr. It is legitimately on the table that he could cut back down to his weight class. 184 is his. That's where he was. That's where he wants to train. That's where he wants to compete in freestyle. 197 is not his. He was doing more of a service to the team. Could Penn State use him at 197? If Cole Mirasola happens to not be ready, well, that depends. If he is ready to go, you have a national title contender at 184 in a really crowded 184, if I can speak, in a really crowded 184 class. 174, I think it's interesting that Rocco Welsh is training at 79 kilos, which is the equivalent of 174 and a half pounds. I find that very interesting because if you're so content, if your plan is to compete at 184, then why are you still training at 174? What it does is it opens up the door for some flexibility. Again, Cael Sanderson he doesn't plan his lineups out. He plans his lineups out 3-4 years in advance. Okay? Penn State recruited Rocco Welsh once upon a time. He's a Pennsylvania high school kid, was a 2-time state champion, 4-time state finalist. The reason Rocco Welsh wasn't necessarily at Penn State to begin with probably had to do with the scholarship counts. Remember, not too long ago, Penn State and everybody else had 9.9 scholarships to work with. And wrestlers, even if they wanted to be in the Penn State mat room, sometimes, again, you have to do what's better for yourself. So that conversation around the scholarships goes hand in hand, where now the extended scholarship limit, Penn State's probably going to work with 20, give or take. Cael Sanderson's gone on the record with that. That opens up the door to bring in more wrestlers just to compete at a high level and have all of their expenses taken care of when it comes to school. That also opens up the door with the transfer portal for wrestlers to enter, but wrestlers to exit. This is what Cael is trying to do. Recruit as many of the top talent in the world. Yes, literally in the world. We can't just say in the country anymore because Masanosuke Ono is in the room as well. Recruit as many of the top talented wrestlers that are willing just to come in and fight. And when the dust settles, you have an elite lineup. The point about Zack Ryder here is that there was an obstacle every part of the way. At 184, where you could have to fend off both Rocco Welsh and Josh Barr going into next season. I'm just saying it's possible. If Cole Mirasola is not ready, Josh Barr wrestles at 197. But 184 is his natural weight class. That is where he's going to be long term. So Barr, eventually he's got to work his way back to 184. Okay, 174, guess what? That opens up in a season, in 2 years, after Levi Haynes is finished and he's out of eligibility. Yes, there's William Henkel. Yes, there's Asher Cunningham. They could factor into that. But Rocco Welsh said, he's on the record saying it, that if he wants to be the best of the best, he needs to be able to defeat the best of the best, even if they're on his own team. So Welsh isn't afraid of the competition, and I am not trying to imply that Zack Ryder is. That is not what I'm trying to imply here. But you run into more obstacles than just you're 184, or you could cut to 174. There's an obstacle either way. In Zack Ryder's case, it benefits him to go to maybe work with David Taylor again, be at Oklahoma State. He trained at the M2 facility for his entire high school senior season. David Taylor, recruiting's all about relationships and connections, which is why Rocco Welsh didn't end up at Penn State by accident. You need to have a prior relationship. You need to have a prior connection. That's how recruiting works. Okay, you don't just say, I want to be at Penn State. There needs to be a reason you want to be at Penn State more than just, well, I just want to train. There was obviously a desire for Rocco Welsh to be at Penn State even before he went to Ohio State. Zack Ryder has that same chemistry with David Taylor, where I don't want to say that I can guarantee it, but I'd be very shocked if he went anywhere else other than Oklahoma State. Especially since there are opportunities to get into the lineup at 174. I don't know about necessarily 184, but again, he's flexible. He could cut to 174. He could stay at 184, whatever the case is. Rocco Welsh, I think at this present moment, Zack Ryder is not a bad wrestler. This was one of the top pound for pound recruits in the nation for the class of 2024. All of them were. The Mirasola twins, Luke Lillidahl, Joe Seeley, that entire class of 2024 was at conservatively, each of them were top 15 in the nation for the pound to pound across the entire board. So Ryder will certainly factor into being an instant All-American. I think it will take some time for him to be a national title contender, whereas guaranteed at 184, whether it's Josh Barr, whether it's Rocco Welsh, I keep bringing up Josh Barr because I don't think it's off the table that he wrestles at 184 next season. I don't think so. I do find it intriguing that Rocco Welsh can slide right in at 174 and take over for a Levi Haynes when he's finished with his career in due time. The lineup's going to get very interesting here. Zack Ryder, it makes sense. I don't blame him. He's got 4 years of eligibility. He has the connection to David Taylor. Use it. Alex Facundo's already done that. Gary Steen's already done that. Maybe he ends up somewhere else. But what the big part about this with Penn State is that you are losing a wrestler who is a top tier talent, somebody that can train alongside and just better his best, better somebody else's best. Iron sharpens iron. I've said that a lot in the show, but that applies here to Penn State wrestling, of course. And you lose that. You lose somebody that's been described as a high energy guy. Just great to be around. Outstanding personality. He's enjoyable to train against. He's enjoyable just to hang out with. Now you don't have that. Now he becomes an enemy. He becomes an enemy here. Oklahoma State isn't in direct competition with Penn State for the entirety of the season, but now with these recruiting battles, Penn State lands a punch. They get Rocco Welsh when clearly David Taylor wanted Rocco Welsh and tried to make a last-minute pitch. And now David Taylor's going to try to counter and get Zack Ryder out of the transfer portal. Again, no guarantees here, but it would shock me if he ends up anywhere else other than Oklahoma State. It is the nature of college athletics at this point in time. This isn't just football, basketball. This is also wrestling. This extends to wrestling. So I just wish Zack Ryder nothing but the best. I really do. And hopefully he lands on his feet and he gets to compete against whomever. Is it 884? Is it Josh Barr? Is it Rocco Welsh in a little bit of a distant future at 174? We'll see how it all shakes out. Now we got to talk about Penn State's situation at heavyweight. Greg Kirkfleet graduates after being an anchor there for the longest time. Cole Mirasola, well, he didn't look the best in his couple of bouts that he wrestled when he replaced Kirkfleet while Kirkfleet was out of the lineup. So is there concern about Cole Mirasola going into next season as a heavyweight? There shouldn't be. And I'll tell you why coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NCAA tournament is here, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on the action like never before. And right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to who's cutting down the nets. You can pick your favorites. If you got your eye on a few underdogs, FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, game props, you name it. You get to stay in the action with tournament games happening almost every day. There's something always exciting to bet on. It's easy. It's fast. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. And remember, if you are a new customer, you will get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That is FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Cole Mirasola looks to be the heir apparent at heavyweight with Greg Kirkfleet moving on, and I certainly had questions going into the offseason as well. Most people aren't alone in the fact that, hey, is Cole Mirasola ready? I said, hey, if Penn State does happen to look in the transfer portal and maybe they want a graduate senior, maybe they want somebody with 1 year of eligibility left to take over at heavyweight and give Cole Mirasola, that is, 1 more year of training to fully adjust to heavyweight. Because when he was competing in the regular season, he took over for Greg Kirkfleet against the likes of Ohio State and Illinois. Let's analyze those matchups, because most people are going to say he didn't look good, he struggled. You have to weigh the competition here, literally and figuratively. So, Mirasola, why did he struggle against 2 All-America caliber wrestlers? Well, there you go right there, is that he was facing Nick Feldman, who I think is a national title contender next season. He could have been more, he probably could have ended up higher on the podium this season had he not dealt with injuries. Nick Feldman's a really good heavyweight for Ohio State. And Mirasola didn't get blown out, but, I think he held his own, but it was still a decisive victory for Feldman. And that's understandable because Feldman's a veteran and Mirasola is a true freshman that is getting used to heavyweight when he's been wrestling at 215 for all of his high school career and training in freestyle as well. Then he faced Luke Luffman. Luke Luffman, another wrestler for Illinois. He's a veteran, so he's graduating, he's moving on. But Luffman, another quality, crafty veteran where, again, Mirasola did not lose by a large, didn't lose by major decision, didn't get tech fault. He held his own, but it was still a decisive defeat. Nearly had a takedown in that one, though. I will give him that. Almost had a takedown there in the final moments of the first period, if I'm not mistaken. Mirasola, when he wrestled Feldman and Luffman, he was giving up, 30, 40 pounds maybe? Mirasola weighed in at around 225. It is difficult for someone who's wrestled at 215 to bulk up all the way to 250 to 260. If you want to do it, you're going to put on a lot of unnecessary weight. So Mirasola is wrestling at heavyweight, sacrificing, you can wrestle all the way up to 285, but I think both Luffman and Feldman were giving up some weight as well. There's not a lot of true heavyweights. Even Gable Steveson didn't wrestle a full 285. My point being is that Mirasola was wrestling, giving up 30 or 40 pounds to the competition. Feldman and Luffman are wrestling at 260, who knows, maybe even 270, and Mirasola's wrestling at 225. 30, 40, 50 pounds against the competition, and Mirasola still held his own. That tells me that you give him the adequate weight. You allow him the off season, the summer, and the beginning of training before the season actually starts. You give Mirasola that another full year to get acclimated. When I mean acclimated, it's not only the competition, it's just being used to being a heavyweight, to putting on all that extra weight, to putting on the necessary muscle instead of just putting on weight for the sake of putting on weight, because then that makes you slower, that takes away from your speed, that takes away from your quickness. And Greg Kirkfleet went through this as well. Remember, Greg Kirkfleet wasn't just a hammer at heavyweight. He was somebody that had to go through this adjustment period. He was an All-America contender and then eventually, gradually became a national title contender. Of course, Gable Steveson stood in his way, but he did become an NCAA champ. He was an NCAA finalist, and if it wasn't for the injury this past season, he does. Look, I know Wyatt Hendrickson pulled off one of the greatest defeats, one of the greatest upsets in history there. Greg Kirkfleet was not at 100% when they faced each other. I digress from that. But Mirasola is going through a similar trajectory where he is going to only get better. He's only going to step up. And I think he's ready to go at heavyweight going into next season. Would he be a national title contender, though? It's not out of the realm. And why I say that has to do with the competition. There is so much turnover at heavyweight. Gable Stevenson's gone. Obviously, Greg Kirkfleet. But guys like Owen Treffin, Josh Heinzelman, guys that were up and down the heavyweight rankings that were some of the better ones that if it wasn't for Gable Steveson, maybe this weight class gets a little more interesting. Nick Feldman returns. Ben Keeter, who's double dipping between football and wrestling for Iowa, he's going to come back. Younger Bastida will return from injury. So those are just a few names. So this is a wide open weight class. Also I'll throw Isaac Trumbull in there as well over at NC State. So it's not this... It's anybody's race. It is anybody's heavyweight class to take. And if Cole Mirasola is anywhere close to be I think he is. He has to be, or else Penn State would be targeting a heavyweight pretty aggressively to try to get that to be a replacement for one season. Because I think even still long term, Cole Mirasola is going to be the best option. They're not going to try to find a replacement there, but he was sacrificing a lot of weight. He's wrestled traditionally, whether that's freestyle or in high school, at 210, 215 pounds. And you got to find a way to bulk up to 250, 260 as soon as possible and make sure that's good, healthy weight. That is going to take time. Give him more time. He is not the same wrestler that he was when he wrestled against Nick Feldman and Luke Luffman in the middle of the season and a couple spot starts. You can make the same argument for Connor Mirasola. There's going to be concern that, is he ready? He lost to Josh Barr in the Army Black Knight Invitational. I can guarantee you both Mirasolas have come a long way from where they were in those matchups that we saw once. Both of them won their Southern Scuffles, and Zack Ryder did as well. But both the Mirasola twins, yes, Cole giving up that weight, won the Southern Scuffle heavyweight. So I think he's ready to go. I think he's going to be the starter. If I had to make my educated guesses right now for the lineup, Josh Barr at 184 and Connor and Cole Mirasola taking over at 97 in heavyweight. That's the way it's looking to me. Maybe things change, but at least that's my initial projection for the upper weights. That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. A lot to break down there, so I know the comment section is going to be active. Let me know your thoughts. Be a part of this conversation about AJ Ferrari. Do you think he's a good idea at Penn State or somewhere else? Zack Ryder entering the transfer portal, what that means at those heavier weights. And of course, Connor and Cole Mirasola, as I'm giving them a lot of credit and I have a lot of optimism for them when they are ready to be now that they are ready to be starters in the Penn State lineup. If you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. And for more coverage, more conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And again, thank you so much for checking out this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, and thank you for making us your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, you got to check out Locked On College Basketball with hosts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. March is here. The tournament is almost wrapped up, but be the most informed college basketball fan throughout all of the madness, even as it winds down. You can find Locked On College Basketball available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.